So straight onto the design before we talk about the tech specs of the M1X, the release date and the price. Now there is something I need to be clear about with the actual design. It is most likely Apple will keep the same design for the first generation M1 iMac. Now the reason behind this is Apple loved to upgrade the specs in an old design first before updating to a new design. History has shown us over the last 15 years or so, Apple always do this first before moving on to a new design. However, along with that new design, it retains the same specs as the last generation. Now, I know I'm probably confusing you here, so let's try to make this simple to understand what I mean. Let's look at the latest Apple event. We got the new M1 chipset and technology under the hood in the MacBook Pro, the Air and the Mac Mini, but the actual designs of these models stayed the same as the previous Intel versions and specs that were inside them. But then, the next generation of MacBooks, for example, will get a whole new design, but the same M1 specs that are in the current new MacBooks now will be in that new design. Apple have done this many times before. For example, if we take a look at the last designed MacBook Pro 13-inch model that came out in 2015, this was the last of the Retina MacBook Pro that still had all the usual USB ports and everything, but it was super thin. Those exact specs, so I'm talking about the processor, the RAM, the storage options, they were all put in the brand new Touch Bar 13-inch MacBook Pro. There was no bump up in specs of a new Intel chipset, RAM or storage upgrades, just a new design. The actual bump up in specs for the new design happened the year after. Again, Apple have done this in 2012, for example, when they transitioned from the unibody MacBook Pro, so this was the last MacBook Pro to not have a Retina display, to the new Retina display model. But again, it kept all the same chipset, RAM amounts and storage options in that new design as they were in the last of the end of the last design. So I think you're getting the picture here. It is very likely the new iMac will have the new Apple Silicon M chipset technology, but the design will stay the same for now until the generation after, where we'll get a new design but retaining the last Apple Silicon M chipset. So a little more about iMacs. If you know about iMacs, you will know there are two different size models. There is the 21.5 inch model and there is also the 27 inch model. Now it is most likely that the 27 inch model will not see the new Apple Silicon M1 chipset in 2021. The reason behind this is just back in August 2020, Apple updated the 27-inch model with brand new 10th generation Intel processors inside these iMacs. Tim Cook even said that they would be continuing to put Intel chipsets in a few of their Mac models over the next year or so, and it looks like they have done this with the iMacs right now, and then they'll be transitioning them over to Apple Silicon at a later date. Now, with the 21.5 inch model, this is split into two categories, and you have the standard HD iMac and you also have the iMac with a Retina display or the 4K iMac. The standard HD iMac specs last got updated in 2017 with a 7th generation Intel processor, and this is aging quite a bit. Then the 21.5 inch 4K iMac last got updated in early 2019 with an 8th generation Intel processor. These two 21.5 inch models are most likely going to get the new M1X Apple Silicon chipsets inside them in 2021. Now, a lot of you are wondering, well, how powerful is the M1X going to be? As the M1 chipset is very powerful, we're expecting gains of around about 40% more speed over the normal M1. Let me give you an example why this is most likely the case and why 40%. If we look at the A12X in the 2018 iPad Pro versus an iPhone XS that had the normal A12 inside it, you can see that the A12X is about 40% faster than the normal A12. So really what I'm trying to say here is if we get an M1X inside the new iMacs, expect it to be around about 40% more faster, just like on the A12 to the A12X as a benchmark. So like I say again, M1X, expect it to be 40% faster than the current M1 chipset. For the 27-inch model, I believe we won't see a change or upgrade to this design or to the chipset until the earliest, the end of 2021, or most likely the beginning half of 2022, as the iMac line and the Mac Pro line are the most powerful Macs out there, and Apple will need to work on their chipset design to make them super powerful for these devices. So far, we know that the 21.5-inch iMac will get the new Apple Silicon M1X chipset inside it, but will retain the current design. But just like the current MacBook Air, the 21.5-inch iMac may also become the first fanless iMac as well. However, what about that new design iMac in the future, and what are we most likely going to see? Well, it's most likely that Apple will altogether drop their standard HD iMac and keep the 4K screen model instead. We have heard that the screen will also change in size in the future to a 24-inch display as the standard smallest display iMac in a new design. It's also being said the bezels or the border on this new design around the screen will be much thinner, just like the 16-inch MacBook Pro on these new iMacs. At the moment, there isn't much being said for Face ID being added to the camera setup at the top of the iMac. However, it is possible they may add this, as the Touch ID would have been put on an external keyboard instead for an iMac, and I cannot really see Apple wanting to do this. So it'll be interesting to see in the future how Apple will handle the security to unlock your iMac and also make purchases. Other features that may potentially be added to the iMac is the possibility of a wireless MagSafe charger on the base to charge your iPhone or AirPods, but I believe these are just rumours at the moment for a feature like this, so take a big hand of salt in your hand from that big salt bag. For price wise though, of the 21.5-inch model, we expect an actual price decrease on the 21.5-inch 4K devices, as 4K panels are now cheaper to buy, and having a fanless iMac and less parts inside would mean the iMac could drop down by a fair bit in price. We predict there will be a $100 price decrease, just like the MacBook Air M1 had. So the new starting price for the 4K iMac 21.5 model would start at $1,399 US. Just a quick recap of when to expect new Macs over the next year or so. So following the Mac Mini, MacBook Air and the 13-inch MacBook Pro, leaker Min-Chi Kuo believes the next Mac to get an Apple Silicon processor will be the MacBook Pro 16-inch, and with that the long-rumoured 14-inch MacBook Pro. Those Macs are unlikely though to be updated until mid-2021 though. Kuo also suggests that these new MacBook Pro models won't ship until the late second quarter of 2021 or even the third quarter of 2021. If you're wondering where the Mac desktops figure in this lineup, what we've been talking about today, Kuo has made no announcements relating to Apple's plan to transition desktop Macs such as the iMac just yet. With the iMac just updated with Intel processors in August, it does not seem likely we'll get an update on these Macs for a bit of a while yet. So as mentioned, it seems likely the 21.5-inch iMac won't see Apple Silicon processors until mid-2021, and then the 27-inch model probably in early 2022, the earliest. Kuo is usually accurate. He said back in March 2020, before Apple announced the transition from Intel, that the new ARM-based Mac could arrive before the end of 2020, and he was right on the money. So, are you excited about the new Silicon iMac line, and will you be getting one soon after launch, or will you get something else? Let me know what model you plan to buy. Well guys, that is the latest and greatest info we have on the iMac Apple Silicon line at this stage. If we do get any more news, of course we will share it with you. Don't forget, if you have liked this video, to press the like button, and of course to hear the latest gaming, tech news, reviews and comparisons, please do hit subscribe followed by the bell. Until next time, see ya!